Money has died 3 times in human history. Each time it wore a different mask. Each time the world believed it was permanent. And each time the shift happened so slowly that most people never noticed until it was already irreversible. We are living through the 4th death right now. This one is different. This one is final. Because what replaces money this time isn't another form of money. It's something else entirely. Something that doesn't need your consent. Something that doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs you to use it. And you already are. The pattern is always the same. A system emerges. It serves a purpose. It creates stability. Then it becomes a weapon. Then it becomes a cage. Then it dies. But before it dies, there is always a moment when the system reveals its true nature. A moment when the illusion collapses. A moment when people realize that what they thought was money was never really theirs. That realization is happening now, not in headlines, not in protests, in silence, in the architecture of how value moves, in the invisible rules being written into code, in the permissions you never granted but can no longer revoke. The first death of money happened in 1971, the second in 2008, the third in 2020, the fourth is unfolding in real time. And unlike the others, this one won't be marked by a press conference or a policy change. It will be marked by a question no one will be able to answer. Do you own your money, or does your money own you? Let's go back, not to 1971, not even to 1913, to the moment when money stopped being a thing and became an idea. That moment happened in Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE. Clay tablets, grain receipts, debts recorded in cuneiform. This was the first abstraction. The first time humans agreed that value could exist without the thing itself. You didn't need the grain. You needed the record of the grain. That shift, from woo to record, was the original sin of money. Because once value became information, it could be manipulated, it could be controlled, it could be erased. The Sumerians didn't know this yet. They thought they were solving a logistics problem. They were actually creating the template for every financial system that would follow. A system where power wasn't in the gold, it was in the ledger. Fast forward to Rome. Gold and silver coins. Stamped with the emperor's face. Universal. Trusted. Except they weren't. By the 3rd century, the denarius had been debased so many times that it contained less than 5% silver. The emperor's face remained. The value didn't. This was the second lesson. The symbol can survive long after the substance is gone. People kept using the coins, not because they believed in them, because they had no choice. The empire controlled the mint. The empire controlled the narrative. And the empire controlled what happened if you refused. This is the first historical pattern. Control the ledger, control the value, control the people. Now watch it happen again. Medieval Europe. Gold standard, solid, tangible, real. Except it wasn't real for most people. Most people never touched gold. They used promissory notes, IOUs, receipts from goldsmiths who held the gold in vaults. These receipts circulated as money. They were easier to carry, easier to divide, easier to trade. And slowly, quietly, the goldsmiths realized something. Most people never came back for the gold, so the goldsmiths started issuing more receipts than they had gold. Fractional reserve banking, not invented by central banks, invented by medieval goldsmiths who understood a simple truth. If people believe the gold is there, it doesn't matter if it's actually there. This was the 3rd lesson. Belief is the only thing that matters, and belief can be manufactured. The goldsmiths became the first central bankers, not through law, through trust, and once trust was established, the gold became irrelevant. The receipts were the money, the gold was just the story, and as long as the story held, the system worked. Until it didn't. Until too many people showed up at the same time. Until the vault was opened and the lie was revealed. This happened over and over. The Panic of 1792, the Panic of 1819, the Panic of 1837, the Panic of 1857, the Panic of 1873, the Panic of 1893, the Panic of 1907. Each time, the same script. Confidence collapses. Everyone demands the gold. There isn't enough gold. The system freezes. And then, instead of fixing the problem, the system redefines the problem. The gold wasn't the issue. The people were. Their panic, their lack of discipline, their refusal to trust. So the solution was always the same. More control, more centralization, more distance between the people and the gold. Until finally, in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, not to protect the gold, to protect the system from the people. Now we arrive at 1971. Bretton Woods is collapsing. Every central bank in the world is demanding gold from the United States. The vaults are emptying. The promise is breaking. And on August 15th, Richard Nixon walks into a room and closes the gold window. He doesn't call it the death of the gold standard. He calls it a temporary measure. Temporary. 54 years later, it's still temporary. This was the second death of money, not because gold disappeared, because the link disappeared. Money was no longer backed by anything except the promise that it could be exchanged for other money. This was the moment when money became purely informational. A number on a ledger, a balance in an account, a digit in a database. And the genius of this shift was that most people didn't notice. They still used dollars. They still paid taxes. They still believed the system worked because the system still looked the same. Bills, coins, banks. Nothing changed except the invisible architecture. And that architecture was now controlled by a single variable, trust in the institution. Not trust in the gold, not trust in the value, trust in the institution's ability to maintain the illusion. This worked for 37 years, until 2008. The second death was slow, the third death was loud. Lehman Brothers collapsed on September 15, 2008. Within hours, the global financial system seized. Banks stopped lending. Credit froze. The ATMs kept working, but the money inside was no longer backed by anything real. It was backed by a promise that the government would intervene, and the government did. $700 billion printed, not minted, printed, out of nothing. This was the moment when the ledger became the only reality. There was no vault, no reserves, no gold, just a decision by a small group of people in a room to add zeros to a spreadsheet. And it worked. Not because the money was real, because belief was manufactured. The media said it was necessary, the experts said it was prudent, the institution said it was the only option. And people believed, not because they understood, because they had no choice. This was the third death of money, the death of scarcity. Because if money could be created from nothing, then money wasn't scarce. It was infinite. And if it was infinite, then it wasn't money anymore. It was permission. Permission to participate in the system. Permission that could be granted or revoked. Now we arrive at 2020. The fourth death begins, not with a collapse, with a pandemic, lockdowns, supply chains breaking, economies freezing. And the response is the same as 2008, but bigger. $6 trillion, printed in months, not years, months. And this time, the money doesn't go to banks. It goes directly to people. Stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, paycheck protection. For the first time in history, central banks are bypassing the financial system and injecting money directly into the population. This should have been the moment when people questioned the system. If money can be created and distributed this easily, what is money? But that question was drowned out by relief, by survival, by the immediate need to pay rent and buy food. The mechanism didn't matter. The result did, except the mechanism was everything. Because what happened in 2020 wasn't a rescue, it was a test. A test to see if populations would accept a new form of money, digital, traceable, controlled. And the test was successful, not because people wanted it, because they had no other option. Let's zoom out, look at the pattern. 3000 BCE, value becomes information. 3rd century, symbols outlive substance. Medieval Europe, receipts replace gold. 1913, centralization replaces trust. 1971, promises replace backing. 2008, ledgers replace scarcity. 2020, permission replaces ownership. Each step is a reduction, a stripping away, not of money's function, but of money's independence. Because money was never meant to be independent. It was meant to be controlled. And control requires 3 things: centralization, surveillance, enforcement. We have all 3 now. Central banks control the supply. Surveillance monitors every transaction. Enforcement is automatic, algorithmic, invisible. You don't need police, you need code. And code doesn't negotiate. Now watch what's happening. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. 60 countries are piloting them. 30 have launched prototypes. The European Central Bank is targeting 2025. The Federal Reserve is studying implementation. China has already deployed the digital yuan in over 200 million wallets. This isn't theoretical, this is infrastructure. And the language around CBDCs is always the same. Efficiency, inclusion, security, financial stability, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing, all true, all necessary, all irrelevant. Because the real function of CBDCs isn't efficiency. It's control. Programmable money, money with expiration dates, money that can only be spent on certain goods, money that can be frozen without a court order, money that knows where you are, what you buy, who you associate with. This isn't speculation. This is already written into pilot programs. The Bahamas, Nigeria, Sweden, Jamaica, the Eastern Caribbean, all testing versions of money that track, limit, and control. And the remarkable thing is how little resistance there is. Because most people don't see the difference between digital money and regular money. They're both just numbers on a screen, except one is yours and one is borrowed. Here's the shift. When you hold cash, you own it. It's a bearer instrument. Possession is ownership. When you hold money in a bank, you own a claim on money. The bank has the money. You have the promise. When you hold a CBDC, you don't own money. You own permission to access money. That permission can be modified, it can be restricted, it can be revoked, not by a judge, by an algorithm, and the algorithm doesn't explain, it just executes. Now imagine a world where all money is CBDCs, no cash, no alternative. Every transaction recorded, every purchase analyzed, every movement tracked, not by a human, by a system that doesn't need to justify its decisions, a system that doesn't need to be fair, a system that just needs to enforce the rules you didn't write, rules you can't change, rules you can't even see. This is already happening in China. The social credit system. Your behavior determines your access, not just to money, to everything. Travel, education, employment, housing. And it works. Not because people agree with it, because people adapt, because the system is invisible until you violate it. And by then, it's too late. The West looks at China and says, that could never happen here. But it's already happening. Not through social credit, through terms of service, through deplatforming, through financial debanking. Ask the Canadian truckers, ask WikiLeaks, ask anyone who has had their bank account frozen without trial. The mechanism is already in place. It's just distributed, decentralized, hidden behind private companies and public-private partnerships. But the effect is the same. Step out of line, lose access. And access isn't just convenience anymore. Access is survival. Now let's talk about the warning signs. Not in China, here, in systems you use every day. Sign 1, incremental normalization. Cash is disappearing, not banned, just inconvenient. Fewer ATMs, fewer businesses accepting it, cashless tolls, cashless parking, cashless vending machines. Each step makes sense in isolation, but together they form a pattern of removal. Sign 2, narrative framing. Every major shift is framed as progress. Digital payments are faster, contactless is safer, cryptocurrency is the future, all true, all incomplete. Because the conversation never includes what is being lost. Privacy, autonomy, the ability to transact without permission. These aren't features, these are foundations, and they're being eroded in the name of convenience. Sign 3, regulatory capture. Governments are racing to regulate cryptocurrency, not to ban it, to control it. KYC laws, AML compliance, exchange licensing, tax reporting. The result is that crypto, which was designed to be permissionless, is becoming just another branch of the financial system. A system that requires identity, a system that requires approval, a system that can be shut down. Sign 4, infrastructure preparation. Look at what's being built. Digital ID systems, biometric authentication, real-time payment rails, public-private data sharing agreements. Each piece is justified independently. Digital IDs for convenience, biometrics for security, real-time payments for speed. But together, they create a system where every transaction is linked to an identity. Every identity is linked to behavior, and behavior is linked to access. This isn't paranoia, this is architecture. And architecture reveals intent. Sign 5, emergency normalization. Every crisis is an opportunity to expand control. 2008, bank bailouts. 2020, lockdowns and stimulus. 2023, bank failures and liquidity injections. Each time this response is the same. More centralization, more surveillance, more power in fewer hands. And each time, the powers granted are never fully returned. They become the new normal, the new baseline, the new floor. Now let's connect the dots. CBDCs are coming, cash is disappearing, digital ID is expanding, surveillance is normalizing. And the narrative is always the same. This is for your safety, your convenience, your protection. But protection from what? From yourself, from your choices, from your ability to exist outside the system. Because the final transformation of money isn't from gold to paper to digital. It's from ownership to permission. And permission is not a right. It's a privilege that can be granted, modified, or revoked based on criteria you don't control. Here's what this looks like in practice. You wake up, your CBDC wallet shows your balance, you try to buy coffee, transaction approved. You try to buy a plane ticket, transaction declined, no explanation, no appeal, just a message, transaction not permitted. You call support. They don't know why. The system flagged you. Maybe it's your social media posts. Maybe it's your location history. Maybe it's your association with someone else who was flagged. It doesn't matter. The system doesn't explain. It just enforces. You still have money. You just can't use it. Not all of it. Not for everything. Only for approved transactions. Approved by whom? By the algorithm. By the institution. By the rules embedded in the code. Rules that change without notice. Rules that don't need your consent. Rules that exist to maintain stability. Not your stability. The system's stability. This isn't dystopia. This is design. And the design is already complete. It's being tested, refined, deployed. The only thing missing is adoption. And adoption doesn't require consent. It requires inevitability. Make cash inconvenient enough, and people choose digital. Make digital convenient enough, and people forget cash. Make the alternative invisible, and people stop asking questions. This is how systems die, not with violence, with convenience. Now the question, can this be stopped? The honest answer is no, not because it's unstoppable, because it's already done. The infrastructure exists. The legal framework exists. The public acceptance exists. The only thing that doesn't exist is awareness. Most people don't know what a CBDC is. Most people don't know cash is disappearing. Most people don't know their financial system is being redesigned in real time. And by the time they know, it will be too late. Not because the system is irreversible, because the alternative will no longer exist. You can't opt out of a system if there's nothing to opt into. But here's the final truth. This isn't about money. It never was. Money is just the tool. The real transformation is about power. Who has it? Who controls it? Who decides what you can do, where you can go, what you can own? For most of human history, power was physical, armies, walls, weapons. Then it became financial. Banks, credit, currency. Now it's informational. Data, code, algorithms. And informational power is the most absolute form of power ever created. Because it doesn't require force, it requires compliance. And compliance is automatic when the system is invisible. So here's the warning, not a prediction, a warning. The fourth death of money is not the end of value. It's the end of autonomy, the end of the ability to transact freely, the end of the idea that what you own is yours. Because in a system where money is programmable, permissioned, and revocable, ownership is an illusion. You don't own your money. You own access to the system. And access is always conditional, always monitored, always controlled. The question isn't whether this will happen. The question is whether you'll notice when it does. Most won't, because the transition is designed to be seamless, painless, inevitable. And by the time you realize what was lost, there will be no way back, because the infrastructure of the old system will be gone. The knowledge will be gone, the option will be gone, and all that will remain is the new system. Efficient, secure, absolute. This is not the future. This is now. The only question left is whether you can see it.